Welcome as we study together from the book of God. We're going to be studying tonight from the book of Galatians, also from the book of Acts, chapters 13 and 14. And so if you want to, you can go ahead and get your Bible out. We'll be looking there in just a moment as we study about the churches of the first century and specifically the churches that are found at Galatia. And yes, I did say that correctly, the churches of Galatia. Galatia was a region. We're going to talk about that more in just a moment. And so within that region, there were several cities that Paul and Barnabas and others traveled to. And so from those cities, there were respective churches that came, of course, were established in those cities. And so Christians came out of there. We're going to find churches arising from those places and so forth. And much of that work had to do with the work that was happening with the Apostle Paul, Barnabas, and others. Timothy's going to be involved as well, and others as we go along. But in the first part, Acts chapter 13 and 14, is primarily going to be Paul and Barnabas. So I want you to go ahead and get there. Like I said, we're going to study from Acts, the book of Acts, and also from the book of Galatians throughout this section of our study. And so hopefully this will help you. Will be encouraging to you. Will help you kind of put this, kind of tie some loose ends together and connect Acts with Galatians. In previous studies, we've connected the book of Acts, of course, with the Philippians, and we've talked about the book of Acts in connection with the letters to Corinth, the 2 Corinthian letters, and we have connected, different churches in those ways. And so we're going to just continue on and look at this some more as we think about the churches of Galatia, those churches that existed in that area that we would know as Galatia. And so before we begin, we want to have a word of prayer, and then we're going to jump into our study. Father in heaven, we're so thankful to Thee for this day. We're so thankful we have this time to study and to learn. So thankful for the fact that we can open up Thy word, that we can learn and see how these people were. We can see some of the beginnings, some of the origins of these people, and realize that they were not perfect people. They had their sins, they had their issues that they had to deal with, and we're so thankful for the fact that the blood of Christ made salvation possible, and they were able to obey Thy word, able to obey Thy plan of salvation, and become Christians, and do so even at this time. And so that certainly gives us hope and encouragement. We know we can be forgiven. We know we can be right in Thy sight and serve Thee and live for Thee. We know that we can do so when we see the salvation there of the past and know that You will fulfill Your same loving promises even today upon each one of us. Ask You please help those that are sick, those that are bereaved at loss of loved ones. You'd give them strength and comfort. You would help these folks in their time of need. So thankful for this Bible, so thankful for our study, and pray it will be very helpful and encouraging to us. And pray that much and everlasting good comes from the efforts that's being put forth from this. We ask all these things in the name of Thy Son, Jesus. Amen. As always, if you like, you can go right here to CaneyvilleChurchOfChrist.com, and you can look us up here on our website. You can send questions if you want to send me a question. You can ask those things. You can go. There's all kinds of things to read, to listen to, videos, and all kinds of good stuff for you. And so certainly we want to encourage you that if you are interested in those things and interested in learning more about God's Word, please go to our website, and you can do that. We're on Facebook as well, and those are always available for you. If you like to talk and to study, we're glad to do that, and we encourage you to do the same. Well, let's jump into our study then. We're going to begin here where we oftentimes begin. We're going to look here at this chart, talking about the churches of the first century and talking about what was in mind there. And what you find here with this church, of course, we are looking at modern-day Turkey, okay? And so that's where Asia Minor is. That's where you can see it right here. That's where Asia Minor is. That's where Galatia is, and so forth. We're going to zoom in here in just a moment. But I want you to see where this is in connection, okay? So over here's Italy and Rome over here. And we have been studying about things going on in Greece in some earlier studies. And so now we're back, actually moving farther east for the moment. We're going to go back over here to this area called Galatia. Now, whenever you look here at Galatia, let's see. There we go. When you look here to Galatia, what you're going to find is this area, again, modern-day Turkey. And right here, I've circled an area here where it would be modern-day Iconium. And it doesn't go by that name today, but Iconium would have been roughly in that area that we're talking about here. We find that, of course, just to the south here is the Mediterranean Sea. And so it's been farther away. We're not in an area, kind of some of these other places have been kind of closer to the seashore and kind of closer, closer to the water and that kind of thing. We're farther up now. And so Paul's going quite a ways inland, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But he's going quite a ways inland, and here we find one of those churches, one of those cities, first of all, but where there will be made a church at Iconium. We're talking about Lystra. There's a city called Antioch also over here. And the Bible makes the distinction between Antioch in Syria versus Antioch in Pisidia, Pisidia. So there's a difference between those two cities, difference in miles, and of course difference in how they came about and so forth. But Antioch in Syria, Syria, Antioch in Syria is farther to the east, and there, what I'm saying is farther to the east from this area of Turkey, farther over to the east. And another thing is that place in Antioch in Syria is where the disciples were called Christians first at Antioch, Acts 11:26. Okay? Antioch in Pisidia, Pisidia, Antioch in Pisidia, that's not where all that stuff happened. This is another city, and certainly good came from it, and the church was established and so forth, but that is not the same town as Acts 11. Okay? So let's look here. This map here helps us out, I think, a little better, and actually gives us some of the city names, roughly the rough area where Paul went. And of course, you can look here, and here's the Antioch in Pisidia I was telling you about. That's about right where it is right here. And here's Iconium. We'd circled that on our map earlier. Iconium, Lystra, and Derbe. Derbe was pronounced Derby. That's the way I'm going to pronounce it. Down here's Perga and Italian and places like this. Now, obviously, right down through here is the Mediterranean Sea. Paul had traveled by a boat, by ship up through here. And then, of course, on land, he's come up through and across, and this is kind of his little journey he took on what's considered his first journey. The first journey was into this area right here. Now, it doesn't mean he's never going to come back again, because I want to show you some evidence where he did come back through later on, several years later by that time, because he'd already finished his second journey. He was, and he was back and forth and things, and he does make a stop through here. So he didn't ignore these folks completely, but a lot of his work we're going to read about in Acts 13 and Acts 14. Okay, so that's where we begin with this work, and I hope this might help you a little bit and kind of get an idea for where we're talking about. This is obviously much farther to the east than, say, Philippi and Thessalonica and Corinth and some of those places. So we're coming back closer now toward the Middle East. Of course, still not there, but this is modern-day Turkey. So I think I've covered everything, and if you have more questions, I'll try my best to answer those questions. But you think about the province of Galatia, and again, that's what I want us to notice. This area, back up for a moment, this area all through here is Galatia. And we know that there were 4 cities, Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, Derbe. We know there's 4 cities. And then those who have talked about the southern cities, those more along the coast. There was even more cities of Galatia. And so when we talk about the province, that is a true statement. That's an accurate statement. It's kind of like saying a region. It's kind of like saying a state. This is a whole big area right here, and perhaps even as large as, obviously as large as a country, but this whole great big area. And that's where Paul has gone to, and he's spent a lot of his time there. First of all, we find that this was composed. We already mentioned this: Lystra, Iconium, Antioch and Pisidia, Derbe. But also, we have Phrygia, Lycaonia, Pisidia, Paphlagonia, that's a good one, Paphlagonia, and Isauria. 25 BC, Galatia was bequeathed to Rome by Amyntas. He was Galatia's last king. So you think about that province, you think about that whole area we were looking at, and here was Amyntas, if that's the way you want to pronounce his name. He was the king. But in 25, he dies. He gives this region, all of it, to Rome, and so it becomes a Roman province. And obviously, we're talking about, after 30, so you're talking about 40, 50 AD. So Galatia has belonged to Rome for, say, some 70-some years by now. And that's when Paul enters in. And this is where Paul met Timothy, by the way. And it's interesting. You can look in your Bibles in the book of Acts chapter 16, and you can read about this, how that Paul had come into the area into that area once more of Lystra. Now, in Acts chapter 16, it says here, as you look, he says that Paul came in, he came to Derbe and Lystra, it says, and behold, there was a certain disciple named Timotheus. This is the King James. Timotheus, he says, his mother was a Jew and believed, but he says his father was a Greek. And so you see that right there in Acts chapter 16, verse 1. He says he's well reported of by the brethren that were at Lystra and Iconium, and it says him would Paul have to go forth with him, took and circumcised him because he was a Jew, which were in those quarters, for they all knew his father was a Greek. So here was Timothy. And he said they went through the cities. They delivered decrees for them to keep that were ordained to the apostles and the elders which were at Jerusalem. And he says, and the churches, he said, were established in the faith and increased in number daily. Acts 16, verse 5. Now, I think it's interesting that this actually would have been Paul's second time through. Well, technically third, because Acts 13 and 14, they go through that area that I just showed you on the map. They go back through, then to ordain elders in every city. Acts 15, Paul is back at Jerusalem. And there they have the big to-do over circumcision and the Judaizing teachers and all that was going on there. Once that was over with, that's whenever between Paul and Barnabas, they have their fallout about John Mark. And so Paul takes Silas with him. And he says, I want to go back and see those brethren one more time. Now he comes back through, Acts 16, verse 1. Paul comes through with Silas and so forth, and then he meets this man named Timotheus. Now, he's already been through there once. Timothy. He's already been through there now twice. But whenever he comes through this third time, as I read this, and if you want to take issue, that's fine, I'll listen to you. As I read this, I read that this is somebody that Paul didn't know on that first go-round. That he's been in Jerusalem, he's left, he's come back over to this area, Derbe, Lystra, and so forth, the area of Galatia, and now meets Timothy. So, obviously, there's been more preaching and teaching going on. There's been a lot more happening in that area since Paul had been through, and of course, he'd been in Jerusalem for a good while. And so it's a significant portion of time he's in Jerusalem and all of this, and then he leaves, goes back again, and now here we are. And that's where he has met this man by the name of Timotheus or Timothy. And see, that's a big deal because we're going to have, numerous things where Paul is connected with Timothy. Paul teaches him how to be a preacher. He shows how you're supposed to act and conduct yourself. 1 Timothy 3:15, he writes him 2 letters personally. He talks about Timothy saying, I have no man like-minded who will naturally care for your state, when he writes to the Corinthians. And Timothy is just a staple throughout all the epistles of Paul. So this is a big deal. But I want you to understand this is going on in this province, in this country that we know as Galatia. And I told you a while ago, it's about 100 miles north of the Mediterranean Sea. That's what we're talking about. And so it's not on the water, on the ocean, like what we're used to, but it's actually farther up. That's okay, but just kind of give you an idea of where it is. Now, moving on. The character of these people was not unlike others that we've already studied. And I hope by now we're kind of catching on to things. People are people, aren't they? And even today, between reading about the people of the Bible, the New Testament people, and in reading about people today, or just talking with people today, and our interaction with folks today, we see that not a lot has really changed. We just basically drive better cars. Not a lot has changed on human nature, has it? We are people who are prone to the same desires and the same lust and the same sins and the same issues and all of that, just like anyone else. And so that's what you have here. These people at Galatia are very much like us. You had your idolaters. You know it? And we see this in Acts chapter 14, for example. You can look over in Acts chapter 14 and verse number 12, where he talks about how that whenever Paul went, this is when Paul was at Lystra, in fact, when he was there the first time. Acts 14 and verse 12, the people at Lystra called Paul Jupiter, and called him Mercury. That's the Roman names for the gods. You could have said Zeus, for Jupiter. You understand? And so then you had Mercury, or you had Hermes, Hermes, Hermes. Same thing, same person. They just renamed them when Rome took over. But my point is that these people were so idolatrous that whenever Paul and Barnabas came into town, and Paul was preaching, and they were performing miracles and doing all these kind of things, and Barnabas, it talks about Barnabas, how he was there preaching, and Paul and everything, they named him after gods. And then talks about how that the priests of Jupiter, and although they're going to go offer sacrifices, because they're saying, hey, listen, the gods have come to the earth. And so all these gods that we know about from Mount Olympus and all of this, they are on the earth and they're walking around. And so Paul has to stop them, of course. And he has to make sure that they don't do that they stop worshiping. He said, listen, we are men. We're men. We're not gods. And you're supposed to be worshiping God. You're not supposed to be worshiping a man. He had to correct them on that. But they were so idolatrous, that was so ingrained in their mind, that to see somebody with a miraculous gift, to listen to the words of these men who preached and were so persuasive in their preaching, when they listened to that, this is the worst case of preacheritis you've ever heard of. Because they were like, let's offer sacrifices to these guys. They were idolaters. If you look over in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 20, and it, of course, right here on your chart. If you look in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 20, you remember Paul, and back up verse 19, he says the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these. And verse 20, he said some of the works of the flesh, Galatians 5:20, included idolatry. Idolatry. And then he tells, of course, verse 21, they that do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. You're not going to inherit God's kingdom. You're not going to go to heaven. You don't have a chance if you live and you die guilty of idolatry. That's one. Of course, there were several sins listed. Read it for yourself. Galatians 5:19-21. So you're not going to heaven over this. And so I want us to see this when he talks about these folks who are so guilty of these sins. Listen, you are bound for hell here. And so it's not unlike what we've studied before. Not unlike what we've heard before, because they were swayed by the smooth talkers. You know what? In Galatians chapter 1. And, of course, we'll deal with this in more, obviously we're going to talk about it in more detail when we get to Galatians 1. But for right now, Galatians 1 and verse 6. When he says, I marvel. The word marvel there means I'm amazed. You floored me. I marvel at what? That you were so soon moved, that you were moved away from him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel. He said, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you, and they would pervert the gospel of Christ. He says, you are so soon removed. You know what? Look over here for a moment with me in the book of Galatians and in chapter 1. Whenever he says, I marvel that you're so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel. He says, this shouldn't happen. He said, it's not another. He said, but there's some that would trouble you. And he said, they're wanting to pervert the gospel of Christ. That's what they're doing. They're trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. You're so soon moved away. You're swayed by the false teachers. You're swayed by these people who sound good. You're swayed by these people who can talk. You say, well, they talk so well. He said, that's the problem right there, folks. Galatians chapter 3, who has bewitched you? He uses the term bewitched you. That means they have lied to you. They have fooled you. Who has done this? They've so soon carried you away from the truth that you knew, the truth that was preached, the truth that I preached to you, Paul says, and now you're not even listening to it anymore. See, they're not unlike us, are they? We tend to have our idols, don't we? To be honest, we tend to have our idols. We tend to have those things that we put before anyone and anything else. That's what we do. We tend to have those things that are most important to us. It could be a man, it could be a family member, it could be an idea, it could be a thing, it could be some object you've purchased or bought, whatever it is, it could be a hobby, it could be a lot of things. But whatever it is that you have put before God, whatever it is that you've placed before him and said, I give God, most of my life, but this one thing, this is my special thing. This is my one special thing over here, and I've got it and it's mine, and I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to enjoy it, and God can't have this. That's your idol. Whatever that is, fill in the blank. Whatever that is has become your idol. Idolatry will keep you out of heaven. And then number 2 is being swayed by the smooth talkers, being swayed by the false teachers. That's easy to do, isn't it? It's easy to do if we're not listening to God's word. It's easy to do if we don't have our nose in the book. Folks, we've got to listen and got to read God's word. We have to spend that time in his word to know what God wants of us. You know what? You can't just say, I know what God wants, and you don't even read it. You can't say, well, I know what God wants of us because I listen to, my preacher, or I'm watching, videos like this. Well, if I watch that video, well, I'll know what God wants. I trust him. He'll be a good guy. I trust him. How do you know? How do you know that what I'm saying is the truth until you go to God's word and see that it's the truth? Now, I know we've already passed it, but I go back to Acts 17, verse 11. These were no more noble than those in Thessalonica. He said they received the word with all readiness of heart, but then they searched the scriptures daily see whether those things were so. And when you look at that in Acts 17:11 and look at it in its context, Paul was preaching. Now, you'd think that somebody like Paul preaching, you'd say, hey, hands down, he's got it. I believe it. Whatever he says, just say it. Just tell me, Paul, and then I'll be fine. And you might think that, well, that'd be a good way to act, and that'd be maybe a humble way to act, because you just said, hey, I'm going to accept what was said. No. The best way to act and the best way to conduct yourself is when you compare what is said by any man, when you compare what is said with the scriptures themselves. Acts 17, verse 11. And like I said, I do put the verses up here on the screen, quite a bit, and I'll put them up here and you can read along with me, and that's fine. But there's sometimes I'm not putting them on here, and you need to read. You need to search and make sure these things are so. Don't be swayed. And I've never considered myself a smooth talker anyways. I'm pretty rough in my speech. But what I'm saying is, don't be fooled by what a man says, or don't just take what a man says. I can promise you I have the best interest in heart. I don't want to lie to you. I know what punishment awaits me if I lie to you. So I don't want to lie to you. I don't want to lead you astray. I don't want to do that. I don't at all. But mistakes happen. And every man is fallible. So guess what? You better be searching the scriptures. And here's where Paul got after him. He said, they swayed you. Who in the world has bewitched you like this? Good grief. It shouldn't have even happened, and it did. Moving on. What else we find here is the following. If I can get my chart to work, that Antioch did have a large number of Jews. Now, we find that over in Acts chapter 13, where the Bible spends some time talking about Paul there at Antioch in Pisidia, and how he was preaching, and he went to the synagogue. And after he did that, they were like, they didn't really like what he had to say. But the Gentiles were there listening, and they asked Paul said, would you come back next week and say that again? Would you come back again? And he said, yeah, I would. Well, whenever he came back, about all the city was out there waiting for him. I imagine they talked it up all week long that Paul's going to be at the synagogue, and you better be there and listen to him. But there was a large number of Jews there. That's what made this place a synagogue, obviously. And so it's just amazing to think about how these Jews had migrated. Of course, all different people migrate, but how these Jewish folks, they've migrated to different spots all around. Of course, in Jerusalem and there, but there's a bunch of them out here in Galatia. You're going to find a bunch in other places. But then sometimes there weren't any at all. Again, remember Philippi in Macedonia? Remember some of those places? They didn't even have a synagogue in the town. They didn't have a synagogue because they didn't have enough, especially Jewish males, but they didn't have enough people to even get a synagogue going. But here, they have that. And so it's just interesting to look at. And Paul walks them through the Old Testament history and shows once more how the Old Testament, the law of Moses, how that was a schoolmaster to bring you to Christ. Schoolmaster, some versions say tutor, to bring you to Christ. And that's what the Old Testament does. If you don't get anything else, you say, I don't understand the Old Testament, and a lot of those names are hard to read, and blah, 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 and there are a bunch of rules, and I don't get them all. If you don't get anything else out of the Old Testament, get the fact that everything in there was pointing people to Christ. The Old Testament was saying, He's coming. When you get to the 4 gospel records, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they say, He's here. And then from Acts through Revelation, they say, He's been here. So here is the focal point is Christ. And so here are these folks who have been taught about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, who've been taught about Moses and that kind of thing. And Jesus is a type or the antitype of Moses. But you have Jesus, you have Moses, you have David, you have these prophets, so many prophets that spoke about Jesus, and really just to be, hopefully not to add too much confusion, but really about everybody from Noah forward was considered prophets. Actually, Enoch, Noah's great grandfather, Enoch, he was a prophet. But you had prophets all the way through. But the ones we think about so much of the time are those who wrote their prophecies down: Isaiah and Jeremiah and Micah and Jonah and Habakkuk and Zephaniah and Malachi and those guys. And all those prophecies pointed to Christ. And so whenever Paul comes into town where there's a large number of Jewish people, then he knows what he's going to preach on. And he's going to show them by the very truth that they have been listening to, and the very Old Testament facts that they have known, that this Old Testament was leading you to Christ. And Paul can say, I'm now testifying of Christ, that he has come. He has died on the cross. He's buried. He rose again the third day. I can tell you this. This is the truth. And so with that large number of Jewish folks there, you'd think that just would have been easy. Because they'd say, well, that's all the things we've been studying all this time, and he's here and he's come, and well, that's great. Now, unfortunately, as you read this, they were the ones that refused, probably the largest group. And they'd say, well, Paul was fighting, or he was denying Moses, and he doesn't believe in Moses, and he doesn't. Paul was the one that believed in Moses, because even Moses prophesied. Look in Deuteronomy chapter 18. And Moses even prophesied that there is one coming like unto me. He said, it's unto him ye shall hearken. And when he said that, he was talking about Christ. When David talked about this one that's going to come, and he would come from David's seed or from his family, David's talking about Christ. Okay? And just on and on and on. It was there for the people if they would have listened, if they would have followed it and obeyed it. This is the kind of message that Paul is giving to Antioch, Lystra, Iconium, Derbe, and on. Let's go on with this and consider something else about the province of Galatia. Something else about the province of Galatia were the gods that they worshiped. Now, we mentioned this a moment ago about their idolatry. And just to go over this here a little bit, we see that they did have idols that they worship. This one I have on the chart right here, I'm really not sure how to say her name, Cybele. I really don't know how to say it. But this Cybele, I'm going to call it Cybele, was considered the mother goddess. She was the nature goddess of Phrygia, the nature goddess of Asia Minor. Okay? Kind of like when people today say Mother Nature, okay? And that kind of thing. And I know people don't say that necessarily as an idol. Some might. But not everybody says it that way. But that's the idea. Here's Mother Nature. Here is the goddess of all the earth, and the God brings all the goods and the bounty of this earth and the bounty of this land. Well, you need to thank this Cybele, why she's responsible. That's what the Galatians would have followed. The gods of this people, one of them is the emperor. And we haven't had a whole lot of that discussion just yet. But there's been a couple of towns, but we haven't had a whole lot of that discussion. But understand, here in Galatia, the emperor of Rome was considered a god. And this emperor worship would grow and grow and grow over the years, especially throughout the first century and then on through. That emperor worship would grow and grow. But of course it would die down finally. But if he's the emperor, then he must have something special. He must be something special. He must have been, he must be a god walking this earth. And there's more I could say about that. But for now, we'll just say emperor was worshipped. Next, there was a god there that went by the name Men, Men. Now, I understand in our English language, when you say men, you just mean a group of males over here, okay? It's more than one man is men. But, of course, they're not speaking English. They would have spoke, the Greek language, the Latin language, and so forth. And so when that Men name comes up, they're not thinking about a group of males. They use another term for men and for males and so forth, and we could get into that. But just the short version here, Men was the god of fertility, represented by a bull. And so here this Men, a singular god, little g, but he was the god of fertility. And so if you want to have fertile ground, or if you want to have children, or if you want to have livestock, more livestock, and so on, why, if you were in Galatia, you might have gone over and worshipped this Men, this god of fertility. Okay. When you look over as well, Zeus was one, as well as Hermes or Mercury. And we touched on this a moment ago. Lystra was the main one. Lystra was the main people, you might say, or the main city that worshipped Zeus and Hermes. That's not to say the others didn't know about it. Not to say that the others, there might not have been some Zeus worshipers somewhere else. Obviously, that idolatry permeated the whole empire. So I'm not saying it never happened any other place, but I'm saying Zeus and Hermes, that was kind of their main gods in Lystra. That was kind of their main ones that they wanted to focus on a lot. And then so when Acts chapter 14, which we read a moment ago, in Acts chapter 14, when Paul and Barnabas end up in town, why, they are overjoyed because, the main gods we've been worshiping, here they are. And they thought that Paul was Zeus or Jupiter, and then that Barnabas would have been Mercury or Hermes. He would have been that. And so they were wanting to worship, and they had to stop him and say, don't do that. Don't worship us, because, that's not cool. That's not what we're about. And so understand, that's what was going on in those days. And I hope that some of this has been helpful to you, and I hope some of this has been encouraging to you. We might just go ahead and drive a peg here. I'd intended to start some with the church in Galatia. I might just encourage you, if you haven't already, read Acts chapter 13 and 14. You can read Acts chapter 18. And just look it up if you have a concordance, or you have a Bible program where you can look up the word Galatia. Just look it up and see how many times Paul, because Paul was there in like I said, Acts 13, 14. He was there in Acts 16 for a little while. He was there in Acts chapter 18, just ready to drop off Priscilla and Aquila, and then go on down the road to Ephesus. But he was there at different times, and so it's going to come back up and up and up again as you read the book of Acts. Okay? But we'll go ahead and stop for the time being. And I thought this would be a good time for us to just go ahead and quit. I hope this has been helpful to you. This is more of a intro, obviously, and we generally have those, don't we? You're kind of catching on. If you've watched several of these videos, then you're kind of catching on to what we do. We kind of have an intro and kind of tell you about the background and the geography and different things about the people and such, and their connection with the Bible. And then we get into the origin, where the church begins. Then we'll go to the letter or letters and study those. I hope that's been helpful to you. I hope it's been encouraging to you, and hope that as a result of our study, it will encourage you to want to learn more about the Galatians and what they did and how they conducted themselves. And it certainly is a joy for me to be able to do this, and joy for me to be a part of this work, and I hope this is very helpful to you. I want to close with a word of prayer, and then I'll have a couple more things to say. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this opportunity to study. We're so thankful for thy word, so thankful for thy truth. So thankful we have this opportunity, and pray that as a result of what we've learned today, it will be helpful and encouraging to us. It will want us to dig deeper into the Word of God. Such a wonderful thing when we read the book of Acts. So many wonderful things happening. And it's a book of action, a book that is very much people on the move, people doing things for thee. Folks are becoming Christians, folks are serving thee, and it's wonderful to see that example. Let us, please help us, that we might live that example today. We're so thankful for this. We're so thankful for all the blessings you give to us day by day. So thankful for this opportunity. As we found faithfully, and we'd have a home in heaven with thee whenever this life is over. That's all these things in the name of thy Son Jesus, and amen. And now, as I said, I thank you very much for listening and for being a part of this work. And just stay tuned, because Lord willing, we'll have another study. We're going to do these, of course, every week. Well, Lord willing, next week we'll have another one. But in the meantime, you can go to CaneyvilleChurchOfChrist.com, and you can go back and listen to, watch archived Bible studies like this. There's other sermons you can listen to, and sermons you can watch also. We videotape as well. There are things you can read on the website, Bible articles and Bible studies. We have a daily blog. You can go to our blog. There's past issues of the blog, obviously. There's all that kind of thing there for you. So hopefully that'll help you. And of course, you can contact me anytime. And love to hear from you. Love to study with you about things of a spiritual nature. And of course, you can find us on Facebook as well. So thankful for this time in our study. Thankful for you tuning in. Until next time then, Lord willing, we bid you good day.